what's up YouTube? Today I spent the majority of my stream watching a podcast called Baeclast, where we pretty much discussed the direction of PoE in the future and how they're going to take it. And it's of note because a lot of people in the community are very upset with the changes that GGG made in 3.15 and aren't sure about whether they're going to nerf more things in 3.16 and what approach they wanted to do for endgame and all sorts of stuff regarding loot and trade, because there are a lot of problems in the game that aren't currently being addressed, and they do have a vision for the game, and we can only hope the vision is as good as it used to be. So as you can see here, this clip is from 2011, right? And this is before PoE had any maps, and this is what the game used to look like. It's actually unfathomable how much it could have changed, right? So you can see they really like slow-paced gameplay. This is called sweep, one of the top tier skills back in the day, but you can see attack maybe 10, 20 times, maybe the blue mob dies. So you can see this game has come an absolutely long way, but this is pretty much what their vision of the game used to be like. You used to fight mobs one by one. You have to probably use the skill 20 times, 30 times to kill a blue or maybe rare, and that's what it is. And then as time has gone on, the game has become faster and faster, and we do see a completely game than what was originally intended. But what does that hold for the game in the future? We also found out some kind of disturbing news, honestly, about the PoE 2 release date. And that actually gives a lot of pause for me, because 2024 is really far in the future, right? I don't even know what to think about it. I thought it was like 2022 or 23, but 24, a little far in the future. Now, before I start going over the pros and cons of the podcast, I did write out everything in here, so you can see here, nice condensed about what I personally thought was good and bad from the podcast. Don't get me wrong, there are a lot of good points he brought up, but there's also a lot of misdirection and, you know, just general PR talk you would expect from a top tier CEO to have, right? You can literally just always talk about something in a way that makes it hard to really understand what your direction is in the end, but seems very general. But first of all, I'm going to go over my build and some of my trials today with Winter Orb, and I wanted to showcase a little skill called Voltaxic Burst. So my gear for this character, I have not really upgraded. I felt a lot less motivated to upgrade the gear, and I felt more motivated to try out different skills, because the gear is honestly not that fun to upgrade. Each piece is so insanely expensive at this point, and there's not really any content that makes me feel like, oh, I need to make the upgrades. I guess Tropical Island could be a little better, but at this point I'm trying out different skills. Now I wanted to showcase this skill right here. It's called Voltaxic Burst. This is probably one of the worst skills implementations I've ever seen in terms of like, can this skill actually be viable? And this does tie in later on to how they balance certain skills and how they test out new skills. So the way that Voltaxic Burst works is that you hold down the button and then you channel it, and then like 3 seconds later, and I'm running reduced duration in this link, and it will explode, how long? In 1.71 seconds. So it's delayed damage, right? So then it starts going off. Obviously this looks not too bad in Blood Aqueducts, but pretty much you pretty much just have to hold it down and then start running through the mobs. So it looks nice here because it's Blood Aqueducts, but this skill is just horrible. Like, who would want to play a skill like this in maps? And no matter what you do to actually fix it, the damages of the skill is just not high enough to justify it. You could probably put like Conk Effect, and this is pretty much just the Catholic or Stacker being able to carry any skill in the game. Like, this version of Voltaxic Burst is probably the best version of Voltaxic Burst you'll find. And yeah, with a Headhunter, anything can look good, right? But mechanically, the skill is horrible. And stuff like this just makes me really question their whole design philosophy, right? So the only way that this skill could possibly be good, Voltaxic Burst converts 40% of lightning damage to chaos damage. So how can you actually convert lightning to chaos damage? You can't really do it. There's only like Voltaxic Rift. So do they intend us to only use the skill of Voltaxic Rift? So the main thing about this skill is you can't convert all of the damage over to a single element. The skill ends up being extremely gimped. There's really no other way, and that's just how damage conversion works in this game. And the delayed damage just feels absolutely awful to play, and the skill's damage does not justify it. So I did try out Voltaxic Burst. A lot of people asked me to do it, and I could not believe how bad the skill was. and it's just kind of sad because I wanted to try out some new skills on an Aura Stacker. But Winter Orb is not that bad of a skill. It's still everything as you expected. Obviously, this was without GMP, but I tested it out in a tropical island. I'll include the footage after the pros and cons section, and you can see the skill is still pretty viable. It's definitely not that great single target anymore, but I don't think you can expect the skill to be good in single target when they nerf every single build by like 40%. Now, Winter Orb is one of those fringe cases where even on the Aura Stacker, its single target was pretty mediocre. So if you nerf the skill by 40%, then it's probably not going to be viable anymore for doing any like hard bosses. So that's why I bought the Awakened GMP. I tried it all out. It was okay, but I could just see my gear is pretty expensive. I do have some pretty good damage scaling, so it's just not going to be worth it. Then I go look on the PoE Ninja to see other Winter Orb builds, and it's exactly the same thing. Like, people have around the same damage as me, except their defenses are terrible. And that's just another thing altogether, which is that a lot of builds right now, and that's why Aura Stacker is kind of alluring in that you can actually get some semblance of resist and reduction to elemental damage and physical damage reduction while still having good damage because you're scaling both at the same time. Your Aura effectiveness is your defense and offense. So other builds, I try to go make other builds. I go on PoE Ninja, and really, there's nothing to see. Every single build is pretty much either a glass cannon or they're playing some broken meta interaction like Forbidden Right totems. And there probably are some good builds out there, but it's really hard to find the good ones, and they're few and far between. I know, of course, not every single build can be like an Aura Stacker, of course, but the fine line between just having every single build just instantly flop over versus being able to survive and actually do content somewhat reliably is kind of bad, because no one really enjoys dying like 10 times in like one level, right? And that's probably on the low end. But for this character currently, I will probably be still trying Eye of Winter and trying to perfect it. I do believe that Eye of Winter is a top tier skill. Might not be as good as Spark, but it's definitely more fun personally for me to play at the moment. And I do think it has a lot of potential if min-maxed. The gear is pretty min-maxed at the moment, but we can do better, right? We can get better jewels. We can get a +3, +4 shabs. But anyhow, I wanted to keep this section a little brief because I don't really have that much to go over in terms of gear. And I pretty much wanted to discuss, I wanted to discuss about the pros and cons of the, the podcasts. So, Path of Exile 2's release date is actually 2024 at the earliest. That is very, very far in the future. So when you start using the excuse like, oh, just wait until PoE 2, it doesn't really ring true to me anymore. Like, I'm not gonna... It feels really bad when you tell someone to wait for something over 2 years in the future, because they're only somewhat finished with Act 2 right now, and they're planning to have 7 acts in the game, so they're quite a ways away. So let's get into the pros from the podcast. So what did they mention they wanted to do? Additions to aspirational content. Harder content is always better. And this stuff in the parentheses is what is my own input. So additionals to aspirational content means that you're going to add in stuff like T17 Blight maps. You're going to add stuff like Uber Legion. They're going to add Delve that's harder at the lower depth. And they're going to add a bunch more endgame stuff. Maybe more 5-Orb Delirium. Maybe more additional waves to the Simulacrum. And that's always going to be good, right? Because a lot of people's builds, like me personally at the moment, I don't really know what content to do that would challenge my character after a while. And that's why having stuff like this, additional to aspirational content for the end game, is always better. Even though it's pretty general, it is nice to see that they do acknowledge that having harder and harder content is what makes people play more. They also mentioned that they wouldn't mind having Ultimatum be infinite waves or more waves, so we'll see what happens. And this is actually one of the biggest points from the podcast. I see a lot of people's wild take that they don't care about profit and revenue, and I always thought it was kind of crazy. What kind of company doesn't care about profit and revenue? If you don't care about profit and revenue, you can't hire more people to make a better product. You can't invest the money you get from your profit and revenue to make a better game, even if it fits your vision of the game. You can't make the vision of the game without money. And obviously, they still report to Tencent, and Tencent is still shareholders, and they still care about the amount of money they make. And it does show that they do care that they lost 30% revenue. Now, having 30% minus revenue is pretty bad because this league didn't really have anything competing with it. So if they go down this road where they keep making bad leagues or bad changes with actual competition during wintertime, especially the next league, which has historically been bad, then it's going to be an absolute disaster. And I don't want to see them fail. I don't want to see them make less money, because them making less money just means the game is going to be worse, because they're going to have less ability to hire good people, and their hiring is already limited as it is in that they're in New Zealand. So in order to poach some talent over, they need to have the revenue, right? And they need to have the revenue to be able to develop PoE 2 along with the base game right now. So another thing they mentioned was that more new defensive mechanics besides Fortify. As anyone knows, if you play a lot in hardcore or you just play in general, you know that casters get shafted in regards to defense. The best thing for casters is to shield charge Fortify or Whirling Blaze Fortify and pray that you proc it. There's literally nothing else. Before, you could depend on Mind Over Matter to boost your EHP pool, but now there's nothing. Like, that's how it feels like, right? Archmage or Mind Over Matter builds are not as strong anymore, and the defense mechanic for casters is literally just get as much hybrid or EHP as possible with no defense. So you have no actual physical damage reduction, and defense mechanics just don't exist. And that's why some people say that people just keep building more and more damage. So the Atlas, they wanted to shrink it down. I do think this is a good thing, having more flavor for each season. So we'll have, oh, this is the season of Tropical Island. Oh, this is like Atoll. So now they're going to have 100 maps, and it's only going to be 4 instead of 8 regions. This should help out a lot of people who say, oh, the Atlas takes too long to progress. And next we have no more nerfs in 3.16. At least they say so. I probably think they're still going to nerf Spectral Shield Throw and Forbidden Right totems in some way, but they say the only nerf will be the Fortify to make it only melee applicable. So this is a pretty good thing, because I don't think anyone is really looking forward to more nerfs, right? No one really wants to see any more nerfs to mobility. No one wants to see any more nerfs to player power. It's not even like player power at this point. They don't want to see more nerfs to our quality of life, because that is really the crux of the issue, which is they nerfed our quality of life for no reason, and no one really liked the change. You talk to a lot of hardcore players, SSF players, some of the changes are baffling. The flash changes are just not good, and that brings us to the next line. Amidst that, they do not test a lot of changes enough like flasks. Like, I don't know if this is a pro, but at least this shows that they're willing to admit that they are wrong, although they do admit they're wrong a lot. So now this change is honestly something that I can't really overlook, or not over the change, but the statement. Like, how can you not test something like the flask and not know that ailment, playing without ailment immunity by using the new flask just feels horrible. You just get frozen. You don't always have your flasks up, especially since you decided to nerf the amount of flash generated, the flash charges generated. Now, this is something that I believe if someone just tested it for like a couple hours just mapping, like they make a character, try it out with the new flask, they could tell you immediately the game is not fun. Like, the only way they could find it fun is if they were playing a raider or something with ailment immunity. And then if they do find it fun like that, all that means is that everyone is just going to play a raider or find a way to get ailment immunity, and that's just bad design overall. So what they did say is that they're probably going to do changes maybe a little slower and have it more time to test it, whether it's on alpha or whatever. And the next one is no more fragments in leagues. This is probably something they'll actually adhere to, because I think they're pretty scared of the whole backlash for fragments. So Yippee is definitely the right way to look at it. They do not want any more fragments, and they'll find another way of implementing stuff. That's honestly good, but fragments are okay if it just auto loots, right? But they really do not like auto looting, which brings us to some of the cons from the podcast, because no one cares about fragments if it auto loots and it can go into our, our tab with affinities. So now we're going to go into some of the cons, and man, some of them were kind of brain scratching or head scratching. Now, one of the big cons from the podcast was Chris kept mentioning this thing called the addition of a masochist and hard mode. And it was honestly used as a crutch to answer a lot of questions about loot. So a lot of times someone would ask, what about the loot that we get? And then he would bring up this masochist mode, which is this new mode that he's kind of his own passion project, where he's trying to make into fruition as a separate game mode. So now we're going to have SSF masochist, softcore trade masochist, hardcore masochist, hardcore SSF masochists. It's like we have so many different modes. It's like just getting like out of hand, and that's just like ridiculous. No one wants the game to be fragmented that much. A lot of people said that the death of hardcore trade, and it is dead, I can tell you that for sure, is how they've split up the population between hardcore and hardcore SSF. Now I know that most softcore people won't care about the Masochist League or whatever. And the Masochist League is just a league where you turn down the drop rates, you make the mobs harder or hit harder. So it's like having league mods on it, and then you edit your filter so you only see like white or blue, and then you rarely ever get any rares. Like, I don't really know the fun in that. I do know that people like a challenge, but people complain about build diversity, and I can tell you, the last thing in a masochist / hard mode there will be is build diversity. Everyone will be playing brands or totems or something where they can hide in the corner and off-screen mobs. That's just how it always is in every single game that's hard. But the annoying part about this was he kept using this as a crutch to answer questions. Whenever someone asks, oh, when are we going to find some meaningful loot on the ground? He just says, well, in Masochist, you will see that any loot can be meaningful because it barely drops anymore. Like, what kind of answer is that? Obviously, we know that you enjoy this passion project of yours, but hearing this over and over again when it just completely misses the point of the concern for a lot of the people in the community currently. I know some SSF hardcore people probably like the mode, but for the majority of people, like softcore trade people, no one really cares about Masochist or hard mode. And all they want to know is how are we going to find meaningful upgrades from picking it up off the ground. And the next part is no real plan to fix trade. So it seems like there's a huge disconnect he has about how trade actually occurs on softcore, and he even eventually acknowledges the usefulness of bots. So if you actually acknowledge the usefulness of bots, you probably know that there's something that needs to be changed with the trade. So what he mentions is that he wants trade to change by us being able to look on the website and it being better so that you don't have to whisper so many people. But he has no real plan for how to do this. And he just says, we'll consult with our team members and then we'll see what we can do about it. But we understand your problem. Well, the problem has been around for quite a while in trade, and there's really been no solution in sight. The best solution is honestly just the trade bots, or the people helping us out. I mean, my solution is honestly you just highlight the people who are the trade bots so I know to only whisper those people because those people will always invite me. And that's probably the best solution that they probably have at the moment. But no real plan to fix trade. This is not really an SSF problem. This is a softcore trade problem, which is probably 80% of the population who plays this game. Every single time I want to do a map, all I see is fragments to buy, scarabs to buy, chisels to buy, alks to buy, and it's just an awful experience whispering all these people. I want to do some shaper maps. I have to go buy some shaper maps. It just feels awful. There's no other way around it. No real plan to fix crafting or harvest. He wants me to find upgrades on the ground. So when he mentioned why doesn't he want to re-implement harvest, he says he doesn't like the deterministic crafting and how you can just make your perfect year. He wants the thrill of us being able to find our upgrades on the ground and just being able to pick up loot that we can ID and say, oh wow, we found something like that. And that's just kind of like a what the fuck. Like, how am I supposed to find any meaningful upgrades on the ground? When's the last time you found an item, not in SSF League, on the ground that you decided to wear on your character for any period of time after like the first couple days of the league? It's almost never. And most of the times people hide all the rares on their filter except for the highest item level bases. Now, his solution is that he wants to do a smart looting type of thing where like rares would be less rares would drop, but the quality of the mods would be higher. However, this is just something that's taking so long to implement. Like, I've heard about this probably like almost a year ago, or I don't even know. It's been 6 months or so. And I do know stuff takes time to implement, but having no real crafting in the game and just asking us to find upgrades on the ground is kind of not really the best answer to the problem. It feels like a lot of the problems currently are just pushed to the side and trying to be solved in the future with something that has no actual time frame of implementation. And I do think that's part of the disconnect that they have with the community, and why the community honestly gets so annoyed at times is because of so many promises with no, with no like actual end goal or end timeline. So they don't actually have a timeline for the stuff they promise. One of the big things is private leagues. Private leagues was promised in PoE like years and years and years ago. and they only not too recently got implemented. Oh, not recently, but they got implemented a long time afterwards. So it just seems like some stuff that they promise just takes forever to get into the game, and then people will just keep complaining because they said that, oh, we have this one idea that we want to do, but we don't know when we want to do it, but we want to do it sometime in the future. But that doesn't solve the problem at hand, right? That's how you get more leagues like 3.15. It's how you get more leagues where people don't want to play anymore because they see no deterministic crafting and they want us to pick up items on the ground. Well, all I'm finding on the ground is horrible items. And the next con is will not remove Wisdom Scrolls / Portal Scrolls. Now, Wisdom Scrolls are a thing in a lot of ARPGs that don't exist anymore. A lot of things have auto ID everything. And there's a lot of things without even Portal Scrolls. So his reasoning for not removing Wisdom Scrolls was very horrific in a sense, in that he doesn't want to remove Wisdom Scrolls because he wants us to not be able to just filter out everything on the ground, because he thinks that if all the items have to drop ID'd if there's no Wisdom Scrolls, but that's just not the case. You can have items that are un-ID'd and then right click on them in your stash to ID them, right? So this whole like weird thing about not being able to remove Wisdom Scrolls for that sake doesn't even make sense, because you can still have items drop un-ID'd and ID it with an auto ID button or ID just by right clicking it in your inventory. So that is honestly just like, he just wants us to have the weight of something, right? He wants us to pick up a lot of items. But it is what it is. I respect his decision. So next we have 4 new tiers of Flask mods, and this I just find annoying. So people know now that there's 4 new tiers, so it's like rolling an item. So now Flask will have multiple mods types. This is actually a good thing because it means that Quicksilver of Adrenaline will actually go up to 40%. However, this just means there's another thing to micromanage. Now we have to roll our Flask, we have to roll our Watchstones, and it just becomes a lot of stuff. It could be a good thing, but it remains to be seen how rare the Flask mods are and how accessible it is. And this is pretty much what I was talking about earlier. There's no time frame for a lot of changes promised. Before, I thought it was okay, right? Because PoE 2 was right around the corner. I didn't really know how far in the future PoE 2 was, so I was like, oh, they're probably putting most of the changes into PoE 2. But the fact of the matter is, PoE 2 is in 2024. This game still has almost 3 years left to be played, and some of the changes promised just need to get delivered, right? At a certain point, I want to see soonish that there will be some new endgame content or new aspirational content. Like, all of this stuff is honestly whatever. I don't really care so much about the endgame content. The main thing is crafting deterministically. If that doesn't exist, then I want some way to find actual meaningful loot on the ground. If it's an ARPG that allows me to find loot on the ground, that feels a lot better. Like, I don't want to go trade for every item, but that's just a sad state of how it is. And even if I do find loot on the ground, I think that people will still end up trading for other loot that people find on the ground. And no real plan to fix trade. This is actually kind of the most disappointing thing, because there's not even an idea of what they want to do about this, and no time frame means that it's just not going to happen. So maybe in PoE 2 there'll be an implementation, but they really have no idea how to fix trade, or if there's even a problem with trade in softcore. I think that they pretty much have accepted that trade bots are a thing and that we should just use the trade bots, because that's what it seems like. That's what it seems like they want us to do, and it's just kind of sad at that point. But next, they had a current definition for chase items. So this was something that people asked: how can you chase an item if you don't even know where it drops? So their definition of chase items currently is finding a mirror on the ground or finding a headhunter from a random drop. In my eyes, that's not a chase item. Chase item is something that you can actually grind for meaningfully. Like, just say, oh, I can find a mirror on the ground, is such a cop-out for a chase item. I mean, technically it is a chase item, but they did say, however, in this aspect that they'll try to make more uniques from the new leagues better, and they do acknowledge that all their expedition uniques are pure trash. Like, they pretty much say, we missed the ball on that one. We will never design such bad uniques again, such uniques that have such a small niche, such a bad use. Like, there's no one who's using ward. If you're using ward, your build is probably, it could be done better without the ward, right? And that's just the sad part. There might be one or two uniques that might be okay, but the sad part is none of those items are chase uniques. I'm pretty sure that Hate Forge was something that got stumbled onto, and it was an unintended interaction, and it was never meant to be that much of a chase item, and it's just something that happened. Because you saw how cheap Hate Forge was at the start. And maybe we are all idiots, and there are some secret hidden interaction with the new Expedition uniques, but who knows, right? But basically, that sums it all up. I'm going to do a short clip of the tropical island in the end with the Winter Orb, or Eye of Winter. And then, yeah.
I get lost sometimes and I can't seem to find a light between the walls I built for myself right in my mind. And then you came over and you showed me love that I never had seen before. And now, when I got you, it's all gonna be alright. Thinking about all the things we did tonight. What a time to be alive. Just you and I. Just you and I. Only you can put my fire out. You can turn it all around. You can lift me off the ground so we can fly again. So we can fly again. I've been trying hard not to go out of my mind. And all I need right now is for you to stay the night. But if you keep saying that you've got to leave, then I'm gonna be alright. As long as you tell me that we ain't running out of time. Thinking about all the things we did tonight. What a time to be alive. Just you and I. Just you and I. Only you can put my fire out. You can turn it all around. And you can lift me off the ground so we can fly again. So we can fly again.
Overall, game is coming out PoE 2 in 2024. It's kind of far in the future, but there is a lot of work to be done. It doesn't seem like they've actually done that much besides some of the new acts. I wonder how much work they've done on the ascendancies. However, I don't think the game is going to die, right? There's really no alternative, especially with the new delay to D4 probably after they fired the game director and lead level designer. But that's a bad thing. No competition means no improvement at a brisk pace. Competition is what makes people improve faster. And yeah, but 3.16, I do think it will be a lot better. No more nerfs at least. No more nerfs to player mobility. No random useless changes to Flash for no reason that no one ever asked for. And I think that they will be more in tune with the community because this one line right here. They still care about profit and revenue. And they did seem pretty upset that they lost 30% revenue and 40% player base. It's not just a vanity metric. It's actually important for companies to make money. And I think they recognize that too. And they're not actually the most money-hungry company, which is the thing. They don't care about revenue purely because they even mentioned that they had an idea of, obviously, if you have the costume thing, and you can try out MTX, people will be more likely to buy the MTX. And they do mention that obviously they could do a loot pet, which would be very good for their revenue. But they do have a vision for the company and the vision for the game, and they want to stick by it. So at a certain point, they do have to care about the revenue stream. And I do think they will make good changes to increase the player base because they do know what they need to do. Some of the stuff about trade and crafting is one thing, but they probably know by now that people don't like a slower game. They don't like random things to solve that they didn't have to solve before. But if you like the content, be sure to like and subscribe. I do try to stream every day. And next videos will probably be more about Eye of Winter and more about aura stacking, as this is more of like a rant or tangent. Just because I spent so much of my time watching this podcast, I did want to get my opinion out there because I do feel like too much good politics. Like Chris is too good of a talker. He's too good at making things sound good. And obviously more of us nowadays are more educated and don't get debated as easily because of how much has happened already. But I do hope that he does deliver on all of this stuff and he does reconsider his thing about looting and crafting and trading in softcore or even hardcore. But thanks for watching, everyone, and I hope you find more mirrors and exalts than I do, and see you next time. Bye.